Coming up on this special edition of OC News, we dive deeper into a few stories that we found interesting. First responders have walked through uncharted territory throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. We dove deeper into one group you might not have thought about. And COVID-19 might have brought you your very own furry friend. We'll take a look at how pet adoptions during COVID-19 have helped with mental health throughout the pandemic. OC News starts right now. Thank you for joining us at OC News. I'm Kayla Calderon. OC News is brought to you by the broadcast journalism students at Cal State Fullerton. When you think of first responders, your first thought might be police officers or firefighters. What you might not think of is 911 dispatchers. They're the first ones to take the call for any accident. Reporter Bree Eastlick went inside the Folsom Police Department to talk to their dispatchers about what the job entails.
911, what is your emergency?
Jamie Gens is a 911 dispatcher. For the past 20 years, her job has required her to calm and guide people on what many would say is the worst day of their lives.
You kind of get not numb to the emotions, but it's easier to handle because you've already been there, you've already done it, and you're truly answering the phone for somebody's worst day, but you've had their worst day before. You know what to do.
Jamie admits early in her career she got emotional during some of the calls. One call that she still thinks about was her very first call as a 911 dispatcher in training.
This 16-year-old girl who was on a boat in the middle of the lake, and she didn't know where she was, but she had just witnessed her dad crash a jet ski, and he cut his jugular open on the propeller of the boat. So she was just screaming, "My dad is dead, my dad is dead, my dad is dead," over and over. And I was still in training and I didn't know what to do.
To help with the stress and anxiety that comes with the job, the station's provided a wellness room for the dispatchers to help with their mental health. When they take a tough call, they can come in here, they can sit down in the massage chair, and they can dim out the lights.
If I take a really bad call, let's say, like a child dies and it's really eating at me, somebody from peer support could reach out to me and, hey, how are you doing? Checking on you, see if you need anything. There's also a new app that Chris Emery has also headed up, and it's on your phone and it will connect you to licensed therapists.
Even though it's a high-stress job that involves a lot of knowledge, speed, and emotional stress, dispatchers enjoy the reward of helping people every day, knowing that they make a difference.
But then every once in a while you get a call and it's involving like a kid or maybe a girl that something happened to her, and you get to help them, and it's a really satisfying feeling.
Dispatchers hope that you never have to call 911, but if you do, the best way to help the dispatcher help you is to know where you are.
If you had to call 911 right now, would you know the address? Would you know how to tell help to where to find you? Those are things you should think of when, as a citizen, keep yourself safe.
Well, Bree, I know we spoke before the show and you mentioned that you were able to do sit-ins with these dispatchers while filming. Can you give me a little bit more insight on what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was an amazing experience. I got to listen firsthand with my own headset and listen to what the dispatchers were listening to. So I got to hear the phone calls live. So it was very emotional. One of the calls that we actually got, it was a man doing a wellness check on a friend of his. And after about 10 minutes of research of her asking him questions, finding out where he lives, looking at old 911 calls, she was actually able to find out that unfortunately he passed away the week prior. So it was very emotional to hear her call him back and say, "You're gonna have to call the coroner's office, I'm sorry." So hearing him cry and seeing how emotional it was, I'm very glad that they have these mental health programs that they do, because they're very much needed.
I never realized how high stress these jobs were, and like you said, I'm just thankful that these employees have such easy access to these programs, so thank you. The transition into person learning to online wouldn't be possible without the support from principals. Elisa Garcia has more on the story.
COVID-19 has caused schools in California to shut down for over a year. Most schools have adjusted to the transition, but the transition wouldn't be as successful without the support and hard work from principals. Cretia Sims Robinson is the principal at Jones Elementary School who recalls the stress that came with her school shut down back in 2020.
Call to all staff members, letting them know that we need an emergency meeting in the staff room. I told them what was happening, what was occurring, to get all your stuff, books. We don't know if we're going to come back or not.
Sims Robinson wanted to do everything she could for her students and staff to make the transition to online successful for all. Her school provided students and teachers with any electronics they needed to be successful.
All of our kids have devices, whether they're a laptop or an iPad, depending on their comfort level. I make sure that my teachers have several devices. So they had their big computer, their iMac computer, then they had their laptop, and then they also had their laptop, and they also had their iPad. So making sure.
In addition to providing electronics to ensure students' success, Sims Robinson wanted to do more to help students by providing her students with any additional resources they may need during these hard times.
We're doing grab and goes at our site to make sure our kids have books, supplies, shoes, PE equipment, music equipment, anything you can think of. We're making sure that our kids have everything they need.
The support Sims Robinson has provided at her school doesn't stop with students. She shares that her staff has access to free and anonymous counseling to help them through these hard times.
There's only one you, so just definitely take care of yourself.
Sims Robinson knows that the online transition has been hard on her school, but continues doing what she can to uplift the mood by doing movie days, virtual parties, and even board game pickups. She even had signs like these made for her staff and students to show her appreciation for their knowledge and hard work. Sims Robinson doesn't know the exact date her school will return in person, but she continues working hard to support her staff and students. I'm Elisa Garcia for OC News in San Bernardino.
So Elisa, what is something that Principal Sims Robinson is looking forward to once school returns?
So something she mentioned a lot was just missing that in-person interaction with her students, her staff, and even the parents. Online you don't get that, either physical contact, face-to-face contact. So that is just something that she's really looking forward to. Hopefully everything returns back to normal soon.
Yes, we hope so, and thank you, and a big thank you to principals everywhere. As we get closer to the end of the pandemic, schools are returning to in-person learning. We go to reporter James Lee to see what it's like for high school athletes to compete during these hard times.
We need to practice like we're in a game right now. Let's go!
All it takes is a pass and a swing for these group of girls to show what they're capable of. Red Rock 16 Club Volleyball, located in Redwood City, California, were practicing and getting ready for their delayed school season. But after the COVID-19 pandemic took a year away of sport from high schoolers, these young athletes had to set up for a season like no other.
Since we haven't been able to do competitions, it's harder to see where your team is missing or where your team needs improvement. In practice, since things are more drill-based, you don't get to see game-like situations. So I guess that's the biggest downfall.
One of the downfalls throughout the season was not just the limited games and tournaments, but also the certain protocols that had to be followed.
When we're in tournaments, we have to keep our mask on, obviously, and so it's a lot harder to hear, and it's really hard to communicate without screaming, and when you're not communicating, people's energy gets down, and it's just hard to come back up from it. I don't think it's like a normal season at all, just because, like I said, it's really hard to communicate with it, but I wish that we didn't have to play with masks, like if we got tested or we're able to get vaccinated or whatever, and then it would be a lot easier.
Although sports season has not been regulated the same way due to the pandemic, some girls are actually relieved COVID-19 happened.
I think one of the positive impacts is that I don't think that I would have been on this team without COVID. It's kind of crazy to understand, but I think COVID kind of led me to Red Rock and, finding other clubs besides the club that I played for. I think that my experience with Red Rock has been a roller coaster. I think it has a lot of up and downs, and I really like being with the team. We have a lot of chemistry, so that's really nice.
The season was not quite the way they intended it to be, The girls were able to practice for several months before entering their first tournament. But despite the troubles and certain protocols that had to be followed, the Red Rocks team is looking forward to hopefully a normal season moving forward. For OC News, I'm James Lee in Redwood City.
James, always good to see you. So, can you tell me what it was like being able to observe these volleyball games and practices?
Kayla, this season is like a season no other. You know, you would think that wearing a mask wouldn't really affect how you perform in practices and games, but actually affects a lot. You can't hear your teammates talking to you, you can't hear your coaches talking to you, and overall, it's just a lack of communication. And not being able to compete as much as you would during a normal season doesn't really give the athletes the opportunity to really improve on their skills. But like I interviewed one person, and she said that if it wasn't for COVID, she wouldn't be on the Red Rock team. So at least there's something positive out of this unusual sports season.
Well, thank you for that, and a good luck to their future season. It's been a rough year for small businesses, with having to close completely to reopening and having little to no clientele. Our reporter Marjorie Miranda went to Calle Cuatro to check out how businesses are holding up.
In the past year, small businesses have suffered due to COVID-19, especially right here in Calle Cuatro, where most of these stores are Latino-owned businesses. Back in March of 2020, the stay-at-home order was placed, and a lot of small businesses in Calle Cuatro had to close for not being essential. But since then, some stores have gone out of business due to not having enough funds for rent. And the others that have decided to reopen are still struggling to make ends meet during the pandemic. This pandemic has affected me a lot because it is stressful to know that I don't have enough money to pay the rent in full. Now that everything is fully reopening, some businesses are worried about having to pay rent from the months that they were closed. Leticia Cortez reopened her Quince boutique a few months back and has been trying to find the funds to pay her rent. They're still charging us, and after July, they sent us some papers so that we could pay the entire amount since it was closed. We haven't paid it because we don't have money. Quinceañeras are not on high demand right now. Leticia has been making handmade face masks to sell in the meantime. She also mentions how now the city has been offering assistance to business owners on how to grow their social media presence. The city of Santa Ana has been helping the small businesses by expanding the stores to the streets. The city comes once in a while, but to give us permission to put some of our items outside to sell. We want people to come over here, not just to our business, but to everyone else's as well, and for this pandemic to end. With COVID numbers down, California is still on track to reopen to full capacity on June 15th, bringing a bit of hope to business owners in Calle Cuatro. For OC News, I'm Marjorie Miranda in Santa Ana.
So Marjorie, I'm curious to know, what more has the city of Santa Ana been doing for these small business owners?
Well, Kayla, as I mentioned in the video, Leticia said that there's someone from the city that comes and teaches these owners how to start using social media more to grow clientele, as well as offering the streets. So they close down the streets so some people can start selling their items out there, because Calle Cuatro is basically a touristic area. So they feel like if they start selling on the streets, then more people would come to Calle Cuatro.
Well, it's good to know that the city is doing so much for these small businesses during these trying times, so thank you. When we come back, a look at how COVID-19 has affected the staff aboard your next flight. And while many have been waiting to take their first vacation post-pandemic, a pilot shortage might delay your flight a little longer. Find out how after the break. More than a year has passed since COVID-19 pandemic hit the population globally, affecting also many businesses like the aviation industry and their employees. We go to Diana Garcia for more on the story.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard British.
For most people, the sky is the limit. For Sarah, a flight attendant of United Airlines, the sky was home. Her love, passion, and dedication to her career took her to so many places, and she was very happy with that.
At the time when you're in your 20s and you're, single, as I was going to school, I realized like, well, I want to do something more. And so that's when I decided like I would try to become a flight attendant.
Then something unexpected occurred in 2020, a pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic paralyzed the planet, leaving thousands of people without jobs. Here in the United States, Sarah was one of them.
The way the company went about it was that they were offering these special leaves to employees to take so they would not have to pay for them, and they were working with unemployment. So unemployment between our company, because I had investigated myself, because I had never, ever in my life filed unemployment because there was no need for me. So this was the first time, and I was a bit reluctant to do so. But when I spoke to the supervisor, they said that no, we because we've never endured anything like this, that if you file unemployment and if you take this special leave and you file unemployment, that would be justified because you're helping the company save money.
While airline employees struggled to keep their jobs, the government gave the airlines companies a support program to keep their employees on payroll.
2020, the air travel, the passengers, because everything was locked down, not just in the United States, but all over the world. Airlines lost about 70%, almost 70% of their revenue and traffic passengers. So as a result, many of the airlines had to lay off a lot of people. Here in the United States, we had some stimulus monies that helped airlines keep some of their employees on staff. In fact, I had several friends that I'd call them every week and I'd say, "Are you still working?" And they said, "Yeah, we got more money, so we're still working." And a couple of them have never been laid off, but they're very, very senior people. When the stimulus money ran out, that's when the airlines had to lay off people.
Airports and airlines companies are starting to get back to normal, but it will never be the same.
Well, I think of normal in two terms. I think of it as normal in terms of people travel more. The people who've always traveled for, vacation and tourism purposes, to be able to go to other places other than where we live. I see that going back to normal eventually, with the exception of, I think people are always going to have to wear masks when they travel. I don't see that leaving.
It's starting to slowly recover, but from what we've seen is that it's really going to take years and not months for.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. For your safety, please return to your seat and fasten your seatbelt. Enjoy the ride. Thank you.
Hello, Diana. I'm curious to know how the aviation industry is recovering since the initial impact of COVID-19.
It is difficult to say or to have the exact answer right now, but aviation experts say that leisure travel will help the recovery. In the case of business travel, it will take longer. They estimate to recover around 80% by 2024.
Well, we hope to see nothing but positive impacts until then. While travel has resumed as COVID cases decrease, there is still concern over the future of air travel. With many pilots retiring and aviation schools on the decline, America could face a pilot shortage in the coming years. OC News reporter Connor O'Brien sat down with aviation students and professors to learn how they can reverse these trends.
Airplanes are necessary components of everything in life. From transporting everyday citizens to carrying packages to important aid after natural disasters, airplanes are everything. Despite their contribution to our overall economy and GDP, the future of flying could be in question. According to CNN, the airline industry is on the decline and has been continually for 30 years. Because of this, we are expected to see a pilot shortage in 2023. The shortage is expected to be about 10% of the total workforce, or about 34,000 pilots. Dr. Samuel Pavel, a professor of aviation at Southern Illinois University, details what areas this could affect.
What's going to hurt is the smaller, the regionals that feed into the majors, because if they can't find pilots, they can't fly to places that need essential air service, so to speak.
Here in Costa Mesa, Orange Coast College partners with SIU, giving students an affordable option before heading to a four-year university. As a result of programs like these, aviation experts are hopeful the field can take off again. Lucas Renner is a student currently at OCC studying to become a pilot. Renner believes there is a reason for why aviation may be declining.
Besides that, if you want to go in and do your training at a flight school like what I'm doing, it gets very, very expensive. So if you don't really have the money, then I'd recommend maybe going to the Air Force. But
because the cost is turning away students, Dr. Pavel says SIU is working around the mandatory 1,500-hour fly mark required to become a pilot.
Like SIU, we are restricted ATP authorized, which means if you go through our pilot program and take our aviation management degree, you only need 1,000 hours before you can go to the airlines.
In order to avoid the pilot shortage, airlines are taking advantage of our modern day world and technology.
There's also new technology that is right around the corner with a single pilot commercial transport. You've talked to people my age and they're like, oh my God, that's awful. Talk to people your age, you're going to grow up with autonomous cars. Airplanes already land themselves. And so do we need two fully trained pilots, or do we need somebody that's in charge, a captain, and then a technical person?
Reporting from Costa Mesa, I'm Connor O'Brien with OC News.
Hello, Connor. So can you dive a little bit deeper into how you believe these airlines can reverse these trends and potentially market aviation to the younger crowd?
I really think it starts with minimizing the fly hour requirement. Right now it's set at $1,500, which is just a little too much. By the time you factor in about $100 per flying lesson, it gets very expensive. As Dr. Pavel stated, he was saying SIU is down to 1,000 hours, which is kind of helping pilots to be able to afford and pay their way through school. I also think they can take advantage of technology, such as simulators for flying. While this might not, be an exact replica of flying in an aircraft, it's pretty close and would probably cut some costs. I think if they do those two things, they can help to market to younger students and kids who are going into college.
Well, hopefully that all pays out, and thank you. COVID-19 might have pressed pause on the music industry, but one jazz musician isn't letting that stop her from playing her tunes. More on that when we come back.
You could be spreading the coronavirus without realizing you have it, so do your part and stay home. It's important to limit in-person interaction with anyone outside of your immediate household, but phone and video chat are safe ways to connect. It's also important to limit social gatherings. If you need essential items like food and medicine, try using a delivery service. If you must leave your house for essential items, or if you want to take a walk for exercise, make sure to wear a cloth face covering. Stay at least 6 feet away from other people. Try not to touch frequently touched surfaces like light signals, street signs, or benches. And wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds as often as possible. This advice applies to people of any age, including teens and younger adults. It takes all of us to slow the spread of the coronavirus, so stay home unless absolutely necessary. Visit coronavirus.gov for the latest information.
Dog adoption rates skyrocketed during the height of COVID-19, and for one woman, it was potentially what saved her through the toughest of times. I sat down with Kate Clough to see how her adoption experience not only helped her keep busy and happy through quarantine, but led her to also become involved with the new rehoming program for dogs. Kate Clough is among many individuals who adopted a dog during the pandemic. She wound up rescuing a loving sheepdog named Belka, but to her surprise, it was actually Belka who ended up saving her. When COVID first struck, Kate and her family were hit hard, and she was left without a job and her normal routine.
At the beginning of COVID, when everything was uncertain, when no one knew what lockdown would look like, when no one knew how long it would last, my company went immediately to 100% work from home and no longer traveling. So that in and of itself was stressful for me, because by nature, in the work environment, I'm super collaborative, and always prefer to be there in the room to read people and so forth.
With all of her children older and now living lives of their own, Kate's main focus had become her job and fostering dogs.
I think that a little bit before the pandemic, but also since the pandemic, she has been participating in a lot of dog rescues and things of the like. And it's been definitely keeping her busy ever since she lost her job because of COVID. I think that dog-related charity work and having Belka around too has really kept her busy and kept her engaged.
Her daughter Esther said that during her time back at home, Belka and Kate remained inseparable, but it wasn't without its challenges.
Adopting Belka and taking in a couple fosters during the pandemic did keep us busy, and it was enriching and rewarding, I think, especially for my mom. It was not easy. 3 dogs is a lot for one household, and Belka especially, she was like new to the dynamic of the dogs that we had in the house, so it was a little bit of a learning curve, I think, but I think it all worked out pretty well.
As of now, Clough is still unable to foster more dogs due to her busy schedule, but she has become involved with a program through LA Animal Services. This program allows people to rehome their dogs if they are no longer able to care for them properly, as opposed to leaving them at the shelter. For OC News, I'm Kayla Calderon in El Segundo, California. This new program that I was able to speak to Kate about allows people to safely and securely rehome their animal, as opposed to taking them back to the shelter. The only issue they're currently facing is outreach. Their plan is to hopefully reach enough people to offset the chances of shelters filling back up. Jazz music has been historically a male-dominated business. After the pandemic hit, the music industry came to a halt. But for one female jazz player, COVID is just another obstacle to conquer on her path to success. OC News reporter Sam Pena spent a day in Long Beach with the Tatiana Tate Quartet as they prepared for their first public show since the start of the COVID era.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Steady hands and an upbeat tone fill the air in Long Beach. The cozy Jazz Angels studio hosts Tatiana Tate, a CSUF junior practicing for her first public show since the start of the pandemic.
This is my junior recital, so not too much fancy, but we'll save the fancy for next time.
As the semester is drawing to a close, Tatiana and all her bandmates are busily getting ready for their junior recitals, a chance for them to showcase all of their talents and all of their skills in one jazzy experience.
Please welcome Tatiana Tate Quartet.
A talented trumpet player, Tatiana and her quartet have played multiple gigs, including a performance at the Uptown Jazz Festival and a virtual performance for Titan Radio during the pandemic.
And I just want to dedicate my performance to anyone who identifies as a woman and realize that
Tatiana's bandmates are always willing to voice their opinions, and together they create a symphony of success.
Oh, sorry. Working with Tatiana is awesome. It's all about the vibe too, on and off the bandstand. And when you have somebody to work for that's 100% cool on both realms, it's great to work for. So,
just like absolutely consummate professional. I think there's a really a healthy communication, exchange of information, which is usually a problem with other people that I have worked for.
Man, just Tatiana is bullying me.
Oh, trust me, I got my
just over and over again.
You talking mess? Do you get that?
You see that?
Although the Cozy Jazz Studios is welcoming to all, the jazz industry hasn't always been welcoming to Tatiana.
When I go into jazz spaces, you know, sometimes the men there will sometimes they'll support me, and sometimes they won't. Ultimately, it's up to me to determine my own destiny. I won't let anyone or anybody say or try to defer me from like what I want to achieve.
Despite the criticism she's faced as a female jazz musician, Tatiana is driven to reach new heights and hopes to eventually give back to her community.
My heart is really with education. So eventually I would like to create a conservatory somewhere in California to like underprivileged youth. So when people go to college and they can't afford Berkeley or the New School or Juilliard, there's like a place for them to go so we can reach out to those that are talented youth within like lower income and underprivileged areas. So.
With strong skills and a determined attitude, Tatiana is ready for a future of her own making. Sam Pena for OC News.
Well, hello, Sam. What an exciting story. That's amazing. Can you dive a little bit more into your experience with Tatiana's band?
It was a wonderful experience. It actually wasn't the first time I managed to be able to speak with her and to film her. I actually ended up doing their Titan Radio live show that they did a couple weeks back. And I remember while I was there, I had this wonderful talk with her, and she was telling me about her experience in the jazz industry. And she would tell me about how when she first got into the music career and she would go to a stage or she would go to a show, and they looked at her and they were like, you're the main player, like you're the trumpeter, because you don't really see many female artists who are the lead. And she always felt like she would have to tone herself down or not quite be herself, be quieter. And that's something that men have never had to go through when they show up to these events. So seeing her experience and how she's had to deal with that and how she's had to fight for that, to be where she's at now and to see what she wants to be able to achieve in the future was very eye-opening and very powerful. So I really enjoyed my experience.
Well, that's incredible, and it's always good to hear that there's a woman ready to jazz up the competition. That's going to do it for us here tonight at OC News, but remember, the news never stops. So be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts at OC News CSUF. From all of us here, I'm Kayla Calderon, and have a great night.